which might tie in with the idea of chipping people. They could essentially turn off your value at will if you didn't comply with what they wanted, or if you were considered a terrorist or a patriot or a rebel or whatnot.
Sure, and that's certainly a tool they can use, but also bear in mind that there's from our viewpoint, sitting out here on the other side of the powers that be, there's a couple of things you need to bear in mind. The first time they do that to you, they automatically force you down into that 12% or whatever portion of the economy that's black market.
Yeah.
The more they do this to people, the larger that market becomes. They're not stupid. They are stupid, but they're clever. They will be aware of this. So they would be hesitant to use that on a mass scale. And it might be useful on some individuals, but also bear in mind that humans are adaptive. And just because they shut you off of all your currency, all right, so you're going to have a freak-out moment, run around for a week, pulling out what hair is left on your head, and then you...
It seems like what happened, everybody, is that for some reason we lost the link to Cliff, and we're trying to reestablish that right now. So we're going to do what we can while we can, okay? And Cliff, you want to go ahead and explain a little bit about what happened?
Yes, just as we were being dropped through Skype, a bunch of my little alarms went off. I have some honeypots as well as some port monitors, and all of a sudden there were people trying to crack into my system. It happens repeatedly. It's become rather annoying now because they apparently are targeting times when they know I'll actually be online. But I've rebooted and established a dynamic IP, so that'll throw them off for a while.
Well, you're a pretty popular guy.
They'll have to root around to find us, so yeah.
Yeah, we were talking a little bit after we had lost you about how, this information's valuable, and there's a lot of people out there that really just don't want us exchanging it. So that
I think is true. I mean, as paranoid as that sounds, and actually anymore, we've got to all adopt the motto, if you're not paranoid, you're simply not paying attention.
Yeah, well, and it's not paranoia if they're really out to get you.
No, it's still paranoia. It's just valid.
Exactly.
Because paranoia doesn't say that it's not true. It just says you have a fear of people trying to get you.
All right, so anyway, it looks like we had a little bit of fun here with the powers that be, or whoever it is out there. If they're monitoring, then from my view and in my opinion, I can just say you guys can all go F yourselves. The information will get out, so...
And that apparently is the case, and it's happening to a lot of people. I was listening to another show the other day, and they had some interruptions, and it just happens on certain sensitive subjects. But let's jump into some of the prep stuff, and then work our way up towards the space goat farts and the alien wars and all of that.
All right, alien wars is something people have been asking about as well. I'll just let you take it here for a bit.
I would say that's got me really excited. I'm not really thrilled about the whole dollar death business. I've lived through a couple of currency problems globally, and it's not a whole lot of fun. It's rather predictable. This time it's going to be real interesting for people in the U.S. because we're going to get a huge shock to our economic base in the sense that we're consuming a disproportionate share of the planetary resources that has been propped up by the dollar. Once the dollar goes away, we'll have to pay real, true value for things.
Yes.
There's no wonder, for instance, that in Europe they were paying $8 a gallon gas while we were paying $1.29. And it has to do with the fact that the dollar was the currency by which the petrol had to be obtained. They had to buy dollars, therefore we controlled it. Once that goes away, we'll be in a reverse situation, only there will be a natural extreme that we'll have to go to before we bounce back to something a little bit more balanced. Mm-hmm. So it would not surprise me to see things like occurred in Argentina, and to see that you may have to be buying your gasoline in the future from a guy who calls you and then surreptitiously opens up his gasoline store and then sells it to you at $30 or $40 a gallon.
Yeah.
Out of the back of his garage, kind of a deal, right?
Well, we'll do what we have to do. They can control the economy all they want, but if we develop trade amongst ourselves and our own structure of economy, they won't have any control over that.
And it will indeed develop just that way. And it's happened 4 times before on this continent that we've had a currency crash. If you go and read history about what happened immediately before, during, and after, it's going to be a fairly predictable pattern. This time, though, it'll be a little bit different because we don't have the farming resources the way we used to, both for us, all of us, to live on, and as we did in the previous depression. We were far more rural than we were urban as a nation. And also, we're going to have the issue of the collapse of the food supplies this time, so it's going to get really grim that way. So now, regular people ought to just consider a certain level of priority, and they should say to themselves that, you know, we're not rich, we don't have bazillions of dollars lying around, but we have some little tiny bit of resources. We need to think about how to allocate them. And the first thing I would say is get food that you will eat in the case of a breakdown of the social structure. And that means that, you know, you go to the grocery store one day and it simply isn't open because of the riots the night before, or you heard on the news that, you know, there's a trucker strike, or no one's shipping oil and therefore the diesel isn't flowing and therefore the truckers aren't moving, and your store's run out of food in 3 or 4 days. Well, it makes sense to buy food that you will eat. So make sure that if you're buying freeze-dried stuff, buy a little tiny bit of it and sample it just to make sure that it's going to be compatible with you. On the whole, I think there's a lot of stuff in our regular diets that we can buy in store, long-term storage, you know, pasta, that kind of thing. And that needs to be your first priority, because it will be I think at least 3 to 4 months, according to the way that data has shaped up in the crocodile teeth going into a context shift on December 29. And so I say that we had a currency crisis that developed from October 25th through to November 4th, and we're all in tension mode, and we're kind of wondering what's going to happen, and then some kind of release up and down for the rest of November. I would suspect that if we have that current level of a currency crisis, it'll be January or February before we have an even started the process of coming up with patches for the systems that are failing. So that means that there might be 3 or 4 months when food supplies are at best erratic, and everybody should pray diligently that we're able to keep things going without the federal government having to come on in and decide that they need to seize the distribution system to ensure that it all works, because then we'd be truly screwed.
Oh,
absolutely,
definitely.
No question.
See, I think that's a big part of it is preparation. You know, everyone knows this stuff's coming. We got to prepare. And another thing in regard to that is the fear that's out there. I know that there's a lot of people out there that are fearful, that are having anxiety, that are really worried about this. But the one thing that everyone needs to keep in mind is this: if we did not have a collapse, if we did not have a revolution of some sort, if these terrible, terrible things did not occur at some point, nothing would ever change. So this is a necessary evil. And just keep that in mind. You know, it might be fearful for now, but it's necessary. If we're ever going to change and evolve, we need this to happen.
Yeah, and I would actually take the word evil off of it. Let's just look at it as a challenge, right?
Yes.
And here's the way of it is from the martial arts perspective. The ordinary person sees everything that comes into their life as either a curse or a blessing. And so they're constantly jerked back and forth in an emotional state between euphoria and depression by their very daily activities that they encounter. And so if you just twist your mind a little bit and say everything, including blessings, but as well as curses, are really a challenge, and that my goal is to challenge myself to deal with these with equanimity and an even emotional state, regardless of what the circumstances are, then we can all get along a whole lot better without having to put the energy into that back and forth on the, you know, oh, it's good for me, it's bad for me kind of a deal. It also eliminates the issue of fear. Yes, you will have a physical body reaction when something is startling, but your mind will be pre-programmed to respond appropriately because you will have eliminated this whole idea that this is a curse upon you suddenly, so to speak.
Yeah.
But at this point, the one other thing, or two other things really, that need to be considered in our dollar collapse, and especially relative to how the food's been going and the climate change issues here, is that it won't be ubiquitous. So not everybody is going to have the same level of discomfort relative to how the dollar crashes. I was speaking with someone the other day, and we were making some comparisons and some analyses. And for instance, there are some certain conclusions we can come to. That, you know, California is going to do reasonably okay insofar as vegetables, you know, a breadbasket kind of thing. So depending on what is grown in your area, you may find that you are less impacted than in other spots of the country.
Oh, yeah.
So, for instance, it's actually good to be in New Jersey, where they have a great deal of diversity in the farms, and bad to be in Kansas and the other square states in the middle, where they're more monoculture,
And
because they're going to have to bust up.
I'm in the middle of Kansas. I'm just about dead center of the geographical United States.
Well, there you go then. And you know, driving mile after mile after mile of corn, there's not a whole lot of tomatoes and potatoes and other things growing in that corn.
Yep. Yeah, well, even the farmers out here are having a really rough time right now.
Oh, I know. No one in the food industry is making money at the farmer level. That's absolutely totally understood here. Washington is a great dairy state, or used to be, and we've got dairies that are folding, and some of these dairies have, a 30 and 40 and 50 year history here, and they are just not able to make money at all.
Yeah.
And of course, a lot of it has to do with the dollar